She's hot to go, she's ready. She's hot to go right now. She's hot to go, you got to know. Let's stop and do it, girl. I don't have no liquor shop.
The lady with her hair on fire is on the air. America thinks it. Barbara says it.
Hi, this is Barbara. This is KNF X 1100 News Talk Radio. Tonight we have our guest is Andrei Cherny. He is the Arizona chairman for the Democratic Party. And I want to make a disclaimer right this moment. I have not switched.
Not yet.
Not yet.
We have an hour to go.
And he thinks maybe he can convince Randy and I in an hour. I don't know, unless he's got a lot of money.
If you can do that in an hour, Andre, they should have you in Obama's campaign headquarters running things.
No, they should have him in Obama's place. Our call-in numbers are 602-277-5369 or 1-866-536-1100. If you would like to email a question to us, it's haironfire@q.com. Would y'all like to toss a quarter to call it heads or tails to see who gets to answer the question first?
You go for it.
Go for it, Randy.
Me? Go for it?
You go for it, darling.
Me?
Yes.
Moi? I get to go first. This is a first.
I know it is.
This is a first.
Don't let it go to your head.
Okay, I won't. It's a real pleasure to have you here tonight, Andre. I know that I've been aware of you for quite a while. You ran for treasurer in 2010, so I got to know you very well, basically. I knew probably more about you than you would like me to know. But
I'm a big believer in transparency and big, wide open debate. I'm glad to be on and glad to share views. I believe we should be spending more time talking to one another, and I think whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whether left, right, or middle, people spend too much time hearing from people they already agree with and not hearing other points of view, and so it's a good chance to talk about things. That's good.
I spent a lot of time reading through some of the things you've written and trying to understand, what your beliefs and thoughts are, and I got to tell you, I got to tell the listeners that I'm pretty impressed with a lot of the things you've written. You've done some pretty tremendous thinking on a number of issues, and we were just talking earlier, you're now a senior fellow at CAP, is that right?
Right, Center for American Progress, which is in Washington, D.C., one of the think tanks there.
Right, a Democrat progressive think tank, and you're right on the cutting edge of what's going on, and you're basically considered a wonderkin amongst the Democrat Party. So
about 15 years ago I was.
Yeah, so
15, you're only 38.
35, but yeah, I've been at this for about 15 years. 15 years ago, I was working in the White House, and that was when they used to call me
you
Wonder
worked on Al Gore's staff. You were a senior member of his staff, and I know people that work for Al Gore too, and so we've talked about you a little bit, and they've said some pretty impressive things about you. So we're glad to have you here tonight. Taking on the Democrat Party to you after the last election, it had to be kind of a thankless task, really. There's a lot of things that had to be reworked and redone, and I know you're working very hard at it. I'd like to hear a little bit about what you're doing with the Democrat Party and where you think it's going to go and some of your thoughts and philosophies and how you're moving the party forward.
Well, I appreciate that. You know what it's like being a party chair and working on providing some leadership through that venue. I think it's an important role to really help bring people together around how we can move the state forward. As you said, Randy, and as everybody here knows, there's sometimes you have a good year in politics for a political party, and sometimes you have a bad year. And Democrats had some good years in 2006 and 2008, and 2010 was not a good year for Democrats anywhere around the country. I think it was the worst year for any party since 1938. The Republicans had the best year since 1938 for any party. So there's a lot of rebuilding to do, but I think there's a few things we as Democrats need to do, and most importantly is one of the things I believe in very strongly, one of the things I campaigned on when I was running to be the party chair, is to build a Big Tent party. I don't think you can have a situation in Arizona anymore, and there's people who disagree with me probably on the Republican side, and people who disagree with me on the Democratic side, but I don't think you can have a situation in Arizona where you can have just one point of view or one party that's going to be leading. We're a state that's just about a third broken up between Democrats, Republicans, Independents. Republicans, of course, have some registration advantage, but not enough that any one party can rule by itself. And So what I'm trying to do is really build a coalition of Democrats, of independents, of people who are sick and tired of both parties, of people who are Republicans who are fed up with what's been going on in the state over the past few years, and there's a lot of folks who are feeling that way as well. And I think if we can build that kind of coalition, we can start making the kinds of changes we need to do here in Arizona to really, number one, get our economy back on track. We're in year 6 right now of the worst economy our state has ever seen. And should
we attribute that to the former Governor Napolitano, who was the governor at that time when the...
Well, you can cast blame all you want. We've had 40 years of a Republican legislature, if you want to start going down the partisan road, and it's a legislature that makes decisions on spending, that makes decisions on budget. We've had out-of-control spending in the state of Arizona. We've had budget deficits that have been piled on year after year, and we're paying the price for that with what's going on right now. The fact is, look, the economy especially started going downhill late 2008. Governor Napolitano was still here. She left in early 2009. And we've had complete Republican control since then, since early 2009. And at that point, again, it's not about partisanship, but since 2009, we've done absolutely nothing to create jobs in Arizona.
Then let's go down another road. Let's go up a notch. You made the comment that the legislature was controlled by the Republicans, and they're the ones that control spending, etc. Well, when you get to a national level, Congress is the one that controls spending, and it's been controlled by the Democrats.
Well, that's not exactly true. Look, as you said, I worked in the White House in the 1990s. You had a Republican Congress with Newt Gingrich was there, and Trent Lott and Bob Dole.
That had a balanced budget, and a Democrat got credit for it.
Well, let me just finish the point. And you had a Democratic president, and we came together to balance the budget, to have the first time we had fiscal responsibility and balanced budget since the late 1960s, about 30 years. And yes, it was a Democratic president and a Republican Congress working together. Now, after that, starting in 2000, you had a Republican Congress and a Republican president, and we had the biggest season of fiscal irresponsibility our country has ever seen. We went from having a surplus to having the biggest deficits America's ever seen.
No. Those deficits have been far exceeded in the last couple of years.
Well, they've been built on. They have been built on.
By far.
But if you look at where the biggest increase of deficits was, it was between 2000 and 2009. Now, I grant you, those deficits have kept on climbing over the past couple of years, and I don't agree with all that. But if you look at what's happened, that's where the fiscal irresponsibility came from. Anybody who looks at the budget says, yes, the Obama stimulus contributed to it. But the biggest contributions to it have been the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I supported the war in Afghanistan. I thought it was the right thing to do, but that's where the money's been going. And the Bush tax cuts, especially for the tax cuts of people making over $1 million. Now, that's a decision we as a country made, but we're facing a fiscal calamity because of that.
Well, let's talk about it, because I pulled this off of your website here, and this is what you said. This is Obama's America, and this is in the winter of 2009 when President Obama was coming into office, and this is what you wrote. Barack Obama takes office after 8 years of a disastrous administration, 2 bungled wars, a record-setting deficit, a near economic collapse, and a government that isn't trusted at home or abroad, or have become the legacy of not just George Bush's presidency, but of the nearly unchecked ascent to conservative ideology in government. Now, are you telling me that we had 2 bungled wars, we won the war in Iraq, and President Obama is basically using the Bush approach in Afghanistan to move that war forward as well? So how can you say the wars were bungled when we were attacked in 2000, 9/11?
And I support.
Okay, and we had to go to war with Afghanistan. Absolutely. We dealt with it. We dealt with Iraq successfully.
We did.
It cost a lot of money. Sure. I agree with that. It did cost a lot of money, and we couldn't afford to spend. You can't have guns and butter. Well, exactly. And we've had this before, and we tried to have both, and you can't have both. And we've suffered the consequences of that. But compared to what's going on now,
let me respond to you on the wars before you move on, because the wars were bungled. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't have gone into Afghanistan. In fact, I supported going in, and not only that, I signed up to serve my country in uniform right after 9/11 because of that. So I fully supported what was going on in Afghanistan. We did not win the war in Iraq, and I'm sorry to say it. And that's despite the best efforts of thousands and thousands of our young men and women, and many of whom unfortunately lost their lives. And we walked out of there in a situation where that country is still teetering on the brink. I'm not going to relitigate the war in Iraq. In Afghanistan, what President Obama did after the review that he took office conducting in Afghanistan was really recalibrate our entire strategy there, put the kind of surge in Afghanistan that we did in Iraq before under General Petraeus, and really we've started to make some progress there. But even there, I'm one of those folks who thinks it's a very difficult situation because we took our eye off the ball. Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, the international terrorists attacked us on 9/11, and instead of finishing the job in Afghanistan, instead of having the kind of occupation that could really rebuild that country, rebuild it, we could go in a very different direction. Anybody who watched TV saw what happened yesterday in the parliament in Afghanistan. Very, very sad show. People really fist fighting on the floor of the Afghanistan parliament because of the kind of corruption there where President Hamid Karzai's forces tried to kick out 63 of the members of their parliament because they were of a different political party. You're not really having the kind of democracy that I think we could have brought to Afghanistan. Unfortunately, it was fun.
We have lots of social injustice in Afghanistan, huh?
No, not social injustice. That's putting words in my mouth. We have terrorists who are actively moving forward. We have the Taliban resurgent. Anybody who's looked at Afghanistan, whatever your party is, says that the Taliban is coming back. They're coming back with a vengeance. There's huge parts of that whole country that don't have American or allied support or even support from the central government that are being run by the tribes, being run by the Taliban, because we didn't put the kind of resources we should have put into Afghanistan to make sure that they learned a lesson that nobody messes with the United States. Nobody dares attack us the way those folks did on 9/11, and they live to tell about it.
Well, we have 2 minutes, then we have to go on a greed break here and make some money.
I'm all for capitalism.
Yeah, well,
I'm glad to hear
in
that.
reading through your stuff, I noticed you're kind of a capitalist at heart, but
not just kind of.
You're still dealing with this problem you think we have with social injustices that are going on in the United States. If I can get you past that, I can turn you into a real good capitalist before we get out of here.
I'm a good capitalist. I believe in a kind of capitalism where everybody gets to be part of the process, everybody gets to be part of the business world. The more people we bring into that field, the more people we have out there working, out there contributing, out there serving as entrepreneurs, the better off we'll be as a country. That's what built America. That's
we
made
need to have
great.
you run
That
for
is the
president.
history of America, for sure.
We can agree on that.
We can agree on that for sure. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with Andrei Cherny, Randy Pullen, and myself. Our call-in numbers are 602-277-5369 and 1-866-536-1100. If you'd like to email a question, it's haironfire@q.com.
Shadows wash all my cares away. I wake up to a sunny day 'cause I love the rainy night. She's hot to go, she's ready. She's hot to go right now. She's hot to go, you got to know. Let's stop and do it, girl. I don't have no liquor shop.
The lady with her hair on fire is on the air. America thinks it. Barbara says it.
Hi, this is Barbara. This is KNX 1100 News Talk Radio. Our call-in numbers are 602-277-5369, 1-866-536-1100. If you'd like to email us a question, it's haironfire@q.com. We're on the air with the Arizona Democratic Chairman, Andrei Cherny, and Randy Pullen, the former Arizona Republican Chairman. And we're not switching. We just wanted to talk to Mr. Andrei because he is an absolutely exceptional young man that we think has potential to become a Republican.
We already know he's a capitalist, so he's halfway there. We just have to get him there the rest of the way, and he'll be there. You know, I want to talk a little bit about something you wrote. It's called A Jobs Plan for the New Work Order. Okay, I know you're very hot on this. I know you've looked at Obama's administration as the opportunity to reset the New Deal in the new century. Mm-hmm. I'd like to hear a little bit about your thoughts on what you think needs to happen to our economy to move it forward into the 21st century.
Well, when I say resetting the New Deal, I'm not saying we're going to bring back New Deal programs. What I think worked about the New Deal 75 years plus years ago, was it was a response to really the kind of economy we had back then. And it was an industrial age economy. Big factories, assembly lines. That's the way people worked back then. We're in a similar kind of economic crisis, not as big as the Great Depression, but certainly the biggest thing we've seen since then, as everybody says. And what we need to do in this day and age is figure out what does a 21st century economy look like, and how do we really respond to it in a way that has a scale that as big as what Franklin Roosevelt and those other folks did 75 years ago. I believe, and one of the reasons that I am a Democrat is, I believe the economy works and has always worked from the bottom up as opposed to the top down. That the way that America has become great over the years is not just because we've given more and more to big businesses and big corporations and let all that trickle down to everybody else, but that we've helped make sure that we have innovators and entrepreneurs and people out there starting new businesses and people out there who are working stiffs and waking up every morning and going out to do a job and do an honest day's labor, and that's what's made America great over the years. We need to be doing more of that right now in this crisis to help especially our entrepreneurs. The studies have shown, and from all kinds of different places, that almost all of the new jobs that have been created over the past 25 years, since 1980 when Ronald Reagan was elected on through this decade, all of the net new jobs have come from new businesses being formed. It's not the big Fortune 500 companies and those folks that are the job creators. It's not the big CEOs. It's the people who are out there starting new enterprises, creating new businesses. That's where new jobs come from, and we need to make sure that we're helping those folks create new jobs. And there are a lot of different things we can do to have that happen.
I think you're right on the mark there. I'm actually, and you know this, even going back to post World War II, most of the economy in this country has always been based on small business. Now, granted, the share that is big business, the big corporations, the big manufacturing facilities, that's shrunken. Right. And so clearly the small business entrepreneurship is a bigger part of the economy than ever. And you're right. Since the Reagan years, the last 25 or 30 years, we've been driven more and more, jobs have been driven by small business. And that goes back to the tax cuts that were done back in the 80s. And I know that Democrats hate tax cuts, but the facts are that most of the small businesses, those are the guys who make $200,000, $250,000 a year. They create the jobs. Those tax breaks that were put into place really favored them. And now what we're trying to do, we have a Democrat Party that's now saying, let's take away those taxes. It's not the millionaires. It's not the billionaires. They pay very little of the total amount of money.
Well, that's only because all those folks get all these loopholes, so they don't have to pay much. A guy like Warren Buffett pays less in taxes than his secretary.
But the money gets reinvested into more businesses.
But that's what I'm saying. You have this belief that the economy works from the top down. You give more to the millionaires and the billionaires, and it comes down to everybody else.
No, what I'm saying is the tax cuts that are in place now really, by far, are much more of an impact on the smaller businesses than on the larger businesses.
I'm a believer in tax cuts, and if that piece you just mentioned about the New Work Order, the first column there, I say, is a tax holiday for people starting new businesses tied to the number of jobs that people are creating. I'm a big believer in the right kind of tax cuts. But what I don't believe in is something like, for instance, what we saw here in Arizona. Again, the economy started going downhill. 2007, construction started going away, real estate, then especially 2008, going into 2009. The only thing that this legislature has done, we're in basically 2012 now, right, 2012, the only thing they've done is really a corporate tax cut that takes effect in 2014. Now, I don't believe that if you have only a few number of bullets, especially in these tough fiscal times, that the best way to use those bullets is on giving a tax cut to big corporations. I'd much rather give a tax cut and tax incentives to the people on the ground starting new businesses. That's one of the reasons I'm a Democrat, because I believe that we need to build the economy from the bottom up. Tax cuts is part of that, but it doesn't just mean giving the folks a tax cut who can take their companies and, as you were saying in the break, Barbara, move their companies overseas or, use those tax cuts to buy a racehorse or artwork or anything else like that. We need to have tax cuts tied to jobs because that's what we need right now.
True. However, the stimulus money that was given to companies was given to big companies, to big corporations.
Banks.
That are no longer lending, some of them have gone south. Also, if you don't believe in tax cuts. How do you feel about the spending? Because
well, I do believe in tax cuts. I was saying I do believe in tax cuts.
You do believe in tax cuts.
Directed tax cuts.
All right. But with the budget, with them negotiating on the budget, the only thing the Democratic Party has wanted to do was to raise taxes.
Well, that's not true. If you look at where the budget negotiations are right now, where President Obama started out, he said we're going to have $3 of spending cuts for every $1 you'd call them tax increases. I'd call them getting rid of loopholes, but whatever. It's the same thing. So we already started out with him saying 25% of this is going to be raising taxes, getting rid of loopholes for people like corporate jets, and getting rid of the Bush tax cuts for the people on the very top. You can talk about that.
Well,
it's not fair to say.
That's meaningless stuff, talking about corporate jets. I mean, that's insignificant amount of money. You know that.
We had a Republican Congress that said they were going to eliminate funding for Planned Parenthood under the guise of saying that it's going to be balancing the budget, eliminating funding for NPR.
If you want to talk about corporate jets,
let's
talk about Nancy Pelosi's corporate jet.
No, let's talk about corporate jets. No,
it's a meaningless thing.
It's not meaningless. We're talking about the budget deficit. We're talking about all the money and loopholes that are in there in the tax code that these big corporations use. You know, I saw something today. ExxonMobil. You know, you and I.
Let's talk about oil companies.
The Yellowstone.
Here we go. Hold on. The average person out there pays about 20 to 25% in taxes, federal taxes altogether. ExxonMobil pays 16%. Why is that? Why does that make sense?
Why does it not make sense to you? Well, let me tell you why they pay 16%.
All right, tell me why.
Because there's intangible costs, drilling costs, and there's tangible drilling costs. Intangible drilling costs are the costs to actually drill the wells. It's payroll, it's paying for gasoline, it's paying for all the costs it takes to drill a well. That's the same thing that every business gets paid. It's their operating costs. They get to deduct that. Your tangible drilling costs are for assets that you have to buy in order to make the drilling, and you get to depreciate those over 7 years. There's nothing unusual about that relative to the business world. That's the way business works. The cost to produce, you get to deduct.
It works that way because you have lawyers and lobbyists in Washington, D.C. who get to put all these loopholes into the tax code.
Those aren't loopholes.
Where the average,
those are normal business expenses to run any business.
Hold on a second.
You got to become a capitalist.
I am a capitalist. I am a capitalist, and I let you.
There's expenses, and you have net operating income after you subtract
I let you finish. That's a small part of what we're seeing with a lot of these corporations. Are not only just paying low levels, but there's a lot of corporations, as we've all seen, that don't pay anything in income taxes. GE, places like that, they don't.
Obama's budget.
Teresa Hines.
Well, you know, we can throw out these names and things like that and talk about politics. I'm trying to talk about really what's going on in this country.
I know.
So are we.
So it doesn't matter that it is Obama's buddy or anything like that. Let's talk about the real facts that matter.
If you want to know about oil companies, I'm a CPA. I did a lot of work on oil companies. I know exactly how they operate. And believe me, they're not getting any subsidies that are unreasonable or unusual compared to any other business in the world.
I think they are getting special subsidies, as everybody knows. They're going directly to oil companies that have been put there by lobbyists. There was hearings on this in Congress.
When General Motors builds a car and they charge off the cost of building that car, is that a subsidy?
No, that's not a subsidy.
Well, that's no different than what an oil company is doing.
No, because there's special subsidies that are going directly to oil drilling.
I'm going to have to break these guys up and have them hang up their gloves for just a second. We're getting ready to take a break. We need to have a little greed here and sell something. Our call-in numbers are 602-277-5369, 1-866-536-1100. We'll be right back with Andrei Cherny, the Arizona Democratic Party chairman, and Randy Pullen and myself.
Shadows wash all my cares away. I wake up to a sunny day 'cause I love the rainy night. She's hot to go, she's ready. She's hot to go right now. She's hot to go, you got to know. Let's stop and do it, girl. I don't have no liquor shop.
The lady with her hair on fire is on the air. America thinks it. Barbara Says It.
Hi, this is Barbara. This is KFNX 1100 News Talk Radio. Our call-in numbers are 602-277-5369, 1-866-536-1100. If you'd like to email us a question, it's haironfire@q.com. And Charles, we're awfully glad to know that you're listening. And Andrei, appreciate you thinking he sounds like a nice guy. We'll go right back to Randy and Andrei with this conversation that we've got going here on capitalism. Andrei is for capitalism. So, Charles?
Newsflash.
I think we agree on a lot, actually. I mean,
now you're just trying to get me in trouble, Randy.
No. During the break, we were talking about what's going on in Arizona, and clearly Arizona is impacted by what's going on with the housing market,
right,
and mortgages and all that, and what we agree, I think we agreed during the break, is that governors or presidents really shouldn't get that much credit or for that much be held accountable for what goes on, because a lot of it they really don't have much control over.
Sure, yeah. Okay. Look, we said on the break, government doesn't create jobs. That's not
correct. They create the environment.
They create the environment, and whether it's been, we were talking about in the break, whether it's the Transcontinental Railroad, an interstate highway system, or the internet, or the GI Bill, or all these other things that were government initiatives, that's what made America great, what built our great middle class, what built our strong economy. My worry is we're not doing enough of those kinds of things today on the national level or here in Arizona. We're not building that next infrastructure, whether it's things like solar or these new industries of the future, and we're not giving people the skills that they need to be able to build their own lives. That's what we did with the GI Bill. That's what we did with public high schools. We need to be doing more of that to make sure that we're letting Americans as individuals succeed and thrive and have that ladder of upward mobility and upward opportunity that's really been at the heart of what we call the American dream.
Yeah, well, we talked about that. I mean, Arizona is becoming the solar state, and I think we will get there eventually. And we also mentioned that we are both aware that the subsidies giving to renewable energy, those subsidies are astounding. But it's a commitment that's been made that we want to become leaders in the renewable energy and solar energy, especially in Arizona. And so we're going to bite the bullet, and we're going to take and do what it takes to become leaders in that in the world.
It's so important.
That's a good thing.
It's so important. I was glad to hear that you're in the solar industry now yourself, and that's good news, because I am a big believer. I think solar state is a phrase I started using a few years back, and I think it started to take off, because that's really what we can be. You look at where Silicon Valley was and where it came up from, and you look at what Motor City was, Detroit in its heyday. We can be that same kind of thing for solar, and it'd be a powerful engine for our economy, pulling along the rest of our economy, creating jobs, creating private sector economic growth. But we have to make some investments to make sure we happen, because we don't have a lot of time. You said we'll get there eventually, but we're in a race. We're in a race with other states. We're in a race with California and New Mexico and Texas. We're in a race with other countries around the world. Germany, which has the sunlight of Anchorage, Alaska, has more solar power than any other place on the planet. We're in a race to be that center for solar, and we have to invest now so that we can have that kind of success that America had in its heyday with the Transcontinental Railroad and things like that.
Well, I'll tell you that solar panels in Alaska in the wintertime don't work too well.
They're working in Germany for some reason.
Really well in the summertime because they have lots of sun, 22 hours a day, but in the wintertime they barely start to operate. But the fact is, and you know this, that solar panels work really very well very far north and very far south on the Earth. Mm-hmm. You think that, you have to be a place like Arizona. You don't have to be. I mean, San Francisco produces a lot of solar, almost as much as we do here in Arizona. So it's not like that we're blessed with this. We got to work for it. We're not going to get it.
No,
we're not going to get it easily.
It doesn't, people think you walk out and the sun shines. Now, what we are blessed with is we have the best opportunity of any place. We have the most concentrated sunlight, which, as you know, is what you need.
Correct.
Not sunlight that goes and comes away, but concentrated sunlight. We have the most place of any place on the planet other than the Sahara Desert.
It's consistency. We have consistent sunshine, which is really what makes the difference, because you can depend upon it to be there to produce the power when you need it, which is what's critical.
And we were talking about the construction industry. Who knows when those jobs are going to be coming back. Those aren't really the kinds of jobs we want to have a strong growing economy, for people to have money in their pocket and be able to provide for themselves and their families.
I'll take any job. A job is a job. If you're unemployed, a job is a job, and you'll take whatever you can get.
I agree with that 100%, but we should be thinking about what are the best kinds of jobs we can attract to our state, and we can't be a one-horse pony when it comes to construction anymore. I think you agree on that.
But I will go back and say I think the governor is aware of and is promoting and doing a good job with the solar power energy here in Arizona. She's behind it. She gets it. She understands why we need it and why we should be a leader in it. And I think that she's on that, and she's doing a good job.
She's been working hard. My worry is that you have the legislature that last year tried to get rid of the solar tax credit, tried to get rid of the Corporation Commission's renewable energy portfolio. Business needs consistency. If you're going to be trying to be a businessman out there and make long-term contracts, you need consistency. You need to know what's happening. And you had a bunch of solar companies, Kia Serra Solar and other places, that were here in Arizona that pulled up stakes last year. And they said, we just don't trust this Arizona legislature to be able to keep their word about what's going on. And so we can't have that kind of thing. We need a legislature that's committed to solar power. 85% of Arizonans, Democrat, Republican, Independent, agree that this is where Arizona needs to be going. And unfortunately, you have folks in the legislature that are believers in pushing us in the opposite direction.
Well, there are some. There are some like that, but the vast majority of them, Republicans is what we're talking about, really do get it and do understand. Well, that's because who's mostly there. You know, it's like you barely have enough Democrats in the Senate to have a caucus. But anyway, there's enough of them. They get it. They understand where we're going, and it's important in Arizona, and they're behind it. I think we'll get there. The thing I wanted to get around to is the rest of Arizona's economy really is based on the home building industry and the retail which goes along with that and the other construction that supports growth. And we still do have in-migration that's strong in Arizona, and we will get over this hump, but it's going to take a couple more years before that happens, probably not till 2014 or so. So we got a little bit of a run here in order to get through and keep the budget balanced, which we have to do in Arizona. And you look at that, and it was very clear 2 or 3 years ago that you couldn't continue to have 60,000 housing starts a year. It just wasn't there. And the whole country has suffered from that. And now we're in this, what I call the valley of the home building industry instead of the bubble. And I don't know, nationally it's a huge problem for us, and something has to happen.
Well, it does, and it's especially a problem here in Arizona. Part of the problem is that we've been so reliant on that one industry that we haven't done enough to have other sources of jobs. And once that one industry really went away, as it has over the past few years, we've been left with really nothing when it comes to jobs. And that means that you're not out there with people who are working hard, being able to provide for their families, and it means that you're not getting through this valley as fast as you can. You look around the country, other states, Michigan and places like that, and they're doing a lot more, even with their challenges, to start bringing back jobs. And
I'm just happy our unemployment in Arizona is not as big as Michigan's.
True, but we've lost a greater percentage of jobs than they have, and that's unfortunate.
We have a caller on the line. James, welcome.
Well, thanks for taking me on, Barbara. How are you?
Hey, honey, you know I'd take you on anytime. He's my boyfriend.
I'm bothered.
I'm calling.
What?
Hi, Andre. How you doing?
Hi, James. I don't want to get in between you and Barbara. Go ahead.
That wouldn't be nice. Anyway, all men are capitalists, Andre. And from the Transcontinental Railroad to the Internet, neither were achieved by government initiative. What they were achieved were by human initiative through government programs paid for with other people's money. Because nothing the government creates is organic. It's actually done with taxes plundered from others, whether they want to give it to the government or not. And you could plunder and confiscate all the wealth of the United States' richest billionaires, from Bill Gates and Warren Buffett to Oprah Winfrey and Madonna and David Geffen and Steven Spielberg, and that's not going to make a dent in the United States.
James, talk a little faster. We're going to have to take a break in about 2 seconds here.
What's your question, Dan?
I just want to comment about some things that you've said, because the more people preach about government needing to provide jobs for people, the lesser outcomes we're going to have, and the worse outcomes we all are going to have.
And I'm not a believer in government providing jobs for people, and I've said the opposite. I wouldn't use the same words that you did, but I agree. It's taxpayer dollars that have paid for the GI Bill and paid for the interstate highway system and all these things. I think those were good investments. We reaped the reward on that as a country. We made back our money tenfold, 15-fold on the GI Bill. So
I love the word investment, by the way.
Well,
I love when you say something. Yeah. You put the word. That's Orwellian speech, by the way.
Not really. Look, there's some things that are government spending. You spend money on health care. You spend money on things like that. You don't get money back for that. That's maybe money that's worth spending, but it's not an investment. Investment is, as I understand it, you put money in and you get hopefully more money back than you put in. That's what an investment is. Now, something like health care, that's not an investment. That's government spending. Something like the GI Bill.
Hear me talk about taking other people's money and calling it an investment. But a Democrat will say that, and a Republican politician will say such things as well. But if I may say about us taking off the eye off the ball in Iraq a year and a half later, the atrocity of September 11th, the United States Congress, with President gave President Bush the approval to invade Iraq, and now the benefits are formerly the world's richest, most powerful, and dangerous gangster is finally sharing a cell 6,000 feet under with Osama bin Laden, and that, to me, is worth the investment.
Okay, we're getting ready to take a break. We'll be right back with Andrei Cherny, Randy Pullen, and myself. James, thanks a lot for your comments. Our call-in numbers are 602-277-5369, 1-866-536-1100.
Shadows wash all my cares away. I wake up to a sunny day 'cause I love the rainy night. She's hot to go, she's ready. She's hot to go right now. She's hot to go, you got to know. Let's stop and do it, girl. I don't have no liquor shop.
The lady with her hair on fire is on the air. America thinks it. Barbara says it.
Hi, this is Barbara. This is KFNX 1100 News Talk Radio. Our call-in numbers are 602-277-5369 and 1-866-536-1100. If you would like to email a question, it's haironfire@q.com. We have Scott on the line from Tempe. Scott, you have a question, and we're going to talk about health care after Scott gets his question answered.
Well, thank you, Barbara. I appreciate it. You know, I've been listening, and I was kind of struck by something that Randy had said, and 2 points, actually. First, Randy, I think you're wrong on these tax cuts for big oil companies. That had to do with the Energy Policy Act of 2005 that President Bush signed into law under the Republican Congress, and that's going to cost taxpayers $20 billion over the next 10 years. And I was wondering why you think that big oil companies ought to be going or getting the tax breaks instead of people like me and entrepreneurs like your guest is talking about. And the second point I want to make is you said something about solar tax breaks, which I support and Arizona needs. And just a couple of years ago, Randy, when you were the chairman of the Republican Party, you opposed them and you called global warming a hoax and said we didn't need solar energy. And you've seemed to switch on that. And I was wondering if that's a pocketbook conversion on your part, and if so, if you were willing to go campaign to get more Republicans on board to support these kind of loan guarantee programs.
Well, let's first of all talk about the what you brought up about the oil companies, because what you said is correct. They will get $20 billion over the next 10 years. $20 billion is a drop in the bucket relative to trying to fix the problems we have with the spending problem. What? No, wait a minute. I didn't interrupt you. Don't interrupt me. Okay? So what I said was that we have intangible and tangible drilling costs, and that's exactly what they are, and those are business expenses that you experience in the oil drilling business, and those are deductible expenses, just like building a car, the cost of building a car, the cost of buying groceries to sell in a grocery store. Those are costs of doing business, and you get to deduct them. And that's only appropriate. That's the way our system works. Those aren't subsidies. Those are normal costs of doing business that businesses are allowed to deduct. Okay. Well, your second question. Can I answer your second question?
If you give me a chance to respond, I will.
Well, you asked the questions first.
Here's the problem, Randy, which is you were talking about capitalism. Well, capitalism is not a government-subsidized oil program, which is essentially what we have.
That's not a subsidy.
Well,
it is not a subsidy.
The deductions you're talking about, Randy, are different than what I think the caller's talking about, which is special subsidies that are different than the depreciated things that come in the tax code. These are special subsidies that are going just to the oil business.
We're talking about drilling costs. We're talking about the fact that when you hit a well and you determine that you have X number of barrels of oil in there, that as you use the oil up like any asset, you get to charge off the cost of using up your product as a cost of doing business. Why shouldn't that just go on to the consumer like they would in a capitalist society? I think we ought to use that money and do what your guest is talking about, which is... You know what? It's not our money. It's not our money. It's the oil company's money, and they take that money and they have huge profits, and they reinvest it. It's very expensive to be in the oil drilling business, especially when you have to deal with the federal government that's opposing it every time you drill.
Biggest profits of any corporation in human history. What does that matter?
That's great. That's good.
Which is good for them.
In capitalism, that's a good thing.
But then why do they need extra money on top of that? Why do they need those extra subsidies that go only to the oil company and no other business out there? That's what doesn't make sense to me.
Because other companies don't drill for oil.
Sure, but other companies do other things.
Expenses, and every business has operating expenses. So you would say that the cost of building a General Motors car, we can let them charge that off against it when they sell the car. That would be a subsidy in your system. That's what Democrats. It's not a subsidy. It's an expense.
Excuse me.
Why should an oil executive get more?
Scott. I have an email from a listener that says big corporations generate economic energy in all directions. They create taxpayers via providing jobs and wealth in all directions. Example, Apple creates an enormous benefit to society by providing high-paid jobs, products that stimulate the economy, and benefits to stockholders like me, I guess they own stock, who pay capital gains. The government is getting a cut at every turn. How much more does it want? How much is the government entitled to?
Well, what we ought to do
That's how we drive manufacturing companies offshore. That's why they're leaving this country, because they're having to deal with situations like this. Oil companies can't leave the country because the oil happens to be here. So they're stuck here, unfortunately, or they'd probably leave too.
Look, we're not...
Well, oil companies are not using the leads. They're not doing reinvesting in the drilling like you're talking about, Randy.
Because they're not allowed to. You're not going to win this conversation. I know more. I spent 20 years working for oil companies, helping them find more tax cuts. I know exactly where they get their tax cuts from and where they're generated from. So,
Andre, you have a comment?
Well, I do. You look at what they're talking about in terms of companies and companies moving overseas. Nobody's talking about taxing these companies till they move overseas. The question is, how are you actually going to have a strong, growing economy? Take a company like Intel here in Arizona. Now, the former CEO of Intel, Craig Barrett, said that if they were starting up Intel again, Arizona wouldn't even be in the top 10 states they would look at for basing their operations. Not because they're moving overseas to get a tax cut, but because we don't have a quality education system to prepare the workers for the future. Those are the kinds of things we need to look at, because that's how you build an economy. That's how you build an economy from the bottom up. As Randy said, you can keep on giving these tax breaks to oil companies. You can keep on spending and spending and spending to go and give that money to big corporations. The folks who can afford lobbyists, the folks who can afford high-priced people like Randy working for them. But the question is, that entrepreneur out there, he's not getting these tax cuts. The guys out there building the business, the guys like the people who started Apple Computer that your emailer talked about, when they were in the garage in Silicon Valley, they weren't getting a tax cut. They wanted to build a great company and build a great business. They created thousands of jobs, created so much wealth that's gone through our whole economy. That's how we build our economy again. It's not from government spending through the tax code. It's about making sure that people out there have the skills and the help they need to go start those companies and start those great entrepreneurial ventures.
Well, it's like this. It costs $600 to buy an iPad. It costs $260 to build an iPad, total cost and to sell it. Okay, and what you're really saying is the $260 it costs them to produce that and deliver to the marketplace, they should not be able to deduct that off the cost of their sale, because that's an expensive business, but you would call that a subsidy. It's not a subsidy.
No. When I talk about subsidies, I'm talking about something that goes to one specific industry that doesn't go to other industries, that's put there by specific legislation, like what I guess it was Scott mentioned. specific legislation that's targeted to help one industry.
Well,
now that's not a boondoggle. That's a boondoggle.
Fossil fuel industry is unique. It's not like building cars. It's not like building iPads. It has certain expenses and costs that are unique to it, and they should be able to deduct their costs just like any other business deducts theirs.
There's only so much money out there. You can't keep on spending. You have to be fiscally responsible.
But we're talking about $20 billion over 10 years. It's nothing. It's a drop in the bucket.
Well,
it's really more a political discussion. It's really demonizing big oil because it's good to do that as opposed to solving the problem. Let's talk about a second question. A second question is that somehow I oppose solar energy. I have never opposed solar energy. I was one of the first ones to have a solar hot water heater going back to the early 80s. I always thought solar was a good idea. I always knew that eventually it would come around to being a viable product, and it's getting there. It's getting there every day. It's getting closer, and eventually it will get there.
Well, why is it that
but I'm going to answer the rest of your question, which is global warming or climate change, which is now the political correct way to say it, is they're trying to attribute it to man. The man's input is negligible. What's going on with global warming? To try to say somehow we're responsible for it is bad science, really, and it's becoming clearer every day that it's bad science, and that's what it is. That has nothing to do with solar energy. What we do need is fossil energy. That was our past. It got us to where we are, to the nation we are. It's our future. Solar, along with other renewable energy sources, will play a part, and they will replace a portion of that over time, nuclear power and so forth. And if we want to be a leader in that, we're going to have to push forward hard on it. And that's what it takes.
And your support of the federal money towards solar energy is new, and that now that you have a personal financial stake in solar energy, it's similar to you just a few seconds ago saying that you've been looking for tax breaks for big oil companies because you'd worked in big oil for a long time. So
let's cut for just a second and let Andrei, we only have 2 more minutes, let Andrei have the last say since he is our guest. And Andrei, you want to jump in here?
Well, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on here, and I really enjoyed this conversation. Hope we can continue it. Like I said, it's great to hear other points of view and really make sure we get other points of view out there. We're in the middle of a great debate here in our country.
We'll have you back.
Absolutely. And what's going on in Washington, what's going on here, there's some big issues, and we need to confront them.
Okay. We want to thank you very much for coming on the program. Randy, as always, you did an A-plus job. And Scott, if you have a question, you can make it really quick, but I don't have time for a long debate. This is Barbara signing off, saying I'll be seeing you next week. Have a good time. This is KFNX 1100 News Talk Radio.
I'll be looking at the moon.